Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. What the Eric Garner case says about America. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. First of all, we received some letters criticizing me, Charles Krauthammer, and other Fox News analysts for saying the grand jury's decision not to indict a New York City police officer in the death of Eric Garner may have been faulty. That's our position. Writing from Naples, Florida, Larry Ayers says, quote, regardless of the grand jury's verdict, if Michael Brown and Eric Garner had not resisted and allowed themselves to be arrested, they would both be alive today. Simple as that. But of course, it is not as simple as that. Yes, both deceased men should have cooperated with the police officers who confronted them. But as we all know, people do stupid things. In the Ferguson case, Mr. Brown did engage in violence, so I have no trouble with the grand jury's decision not to indict Darren Wilson, the police officer. But in the New York City case, Mr. Garner, clearly a low-level offender, was not a threat. American police are held to a very high standard because they have power, they have guns. They must control inflammatory situations, not make them worse. And as we proved on Monday, generally speaking, American police do a great job across the board. The charlatans who say police are targeting young black men are completely shut down by the statistics, which we have posted on BillO'Reilly.com. But in the Garner case, excessive force may have been used.
This has no connection with what happened in Ferguson. From looking at the video, the grand jury's decision here is totally incomprehensible. It looks as if at least they might have indicted him on something like involuntary manslaughter at the very least.
I will say that upon seeing the video that you just saw, and hearing Mr. Garner say he could not breathe, I was extremely troubled. I would have loosened my grip. I desperately wish the officer would have done that.
This ought to have been an indictment, and it ought to have been an indictment for some form of manslaughter. It's not first-degree murder, it's not second-degree murder, but it's certainly reckless manslaughter.
Now, unlike Judge Napolitano, I am unwilling to say that Officer Daniel Pantaleo committed reckless manslaughter. What I will say is there was a police overreaction to Mr. Garner, and that should have been adjudicated in a court of law. Now, on to the bigger picture. Last night here in New York City, the NYPD did an amazing job of controlling protesters who wanted to disrupt the annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Rockefeller Center. The protesters were chanting, "No justice, no tree." The New York police stopped the chaos, conducted themselves in a restrained and ultra-professional manner, protecting property and the public. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon, who totally botched the Ferguson situation, should take notice. And so should Mayor de Blasio, who continues to denigrate his own cops.
If you talk about the last decade or so in the city, was race a factor and a problem in the relationship between police and community? Obviously it was. The relationship between police and community has to change. People need to know that black lives and brown lives matter as much as white lives.
What an amazing insult to the NYPD. Now, I can tell you with certainty that many police officers here in the city despise Mayor de Blasio. They believe he's intimidated by the likes of Al Sharpton and does not support them. So now we have a situation where the nation's largest city has a mayor who has lost the support of his 35,000-member police force. That's a recipe for disaster. So let's sum up. Many analysts here at Fox News believe the Staten Island grand jury made a mistake in the Eric Garner death. And the mayor of New York City is putting all residents in jeopardy by alienating his own police department for political reasons. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight reaction. With us, the former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. And you say?
Well, first of all, I think the mayor's insertion of race into this case is absolutely unwarranted. Whatever you think of the merits of the grand jury deliberation, this was not a racial case. The sergeant in charge of this entire operation, as I've been told, was an African-American woman who I think is one of the witnesses in the grand jury, who did nothing to stop it, nothing to interrupt it. I don't know what the grand jury testimony is.
No one knows yet.
I'm assuming she supported the police officer. That's a true assumption. And I think everybody's being so opinionated about this is a little premature. Since we haven't read the grand jury testimony.
You say it's not based on race, but the thesis of Mayor de Blasio, Sharpton, all the other activists is, if you're a black man on the streets, the police are more suspicious of you and more likely to take aggressive action against you than they would be if a white man were in the same position.
So suppose that man, he was like 6'4", 300 pounds, right?
350 pounds.
Suppose he was a white man and he refused to comply with the orders of the police. Don't you think they would have done the same thing?
The activists
exactly
would say that if the white man were selling loose cigarettes, all right, he wouldn't have even been bothered.
That's not true at all. Those quality of life crimes are dealt with all the time. Let's take a simpler example. Let's say you're stopped for a speeding ticket. You're doing 80 miles an hour, the police officer comes over and he says, please give me your license and registration, and you tell him to go to hell. What is the police officer supposed to do, walk away? He's going to pull you out of the car. I mean, so in essence, he created this situation by not complying with the orders.
Mr. Garner.
Yes, now.
Okay, and
now,
let me stop you there. I agree with that. And I think any sane person would agree.
Police just can't walk away.
Right. The police they felt their judgment was, and you pointed out, the squad was headed by a black police sergeant.
Correct.
All right. That this man was breaking the law on the streets of New York, and therefore they clearly asked him, before this confrontation we're seeing now took place, to put his hands behind his back so they could take him in. And he had a long record. He knew the drill.
31 arrests.
Right. So then they take him down. What troubled me was when you hear a man say, I can't breathe. You got to stop.
Well, Bill, yes, maybe. We don't know. There are 60 witnesses or so, 40
but that's what he said.
We have to read the grand jury testimony.
I don't know.
To figure out what actually happened. First of all, the fact that he said, I can't breathe, suggests that the chokehold they're talking about hadn't been applied yet. Because if a real chokehold is applied, it cracks your larynx, and you're not saying, I can't breathe.
But you know what I'm talking about. He had a number of individuals on him, and one of them had, and I don't want to adjudicate the case on television. I don't think that's fair. You're right. We only need to say it. But what I'm saying to you is that there is a possibility there was a mistake made. All right?
I grant that.
Okay.
Also a possibility there wasn't.
But the possibility that there was a mistake made then ignites the protesters who believe in their hearts,
Correct.
Some of them are sincere and some of them aren't, that the white-dominated society, not just in policing, but everything, is unfair to blacks, and they're targeting blacks.
Right.
Now, as I said, we got the stats, and they're posted on BillO'Reilly.com, and it shows there's no epidemic of police violence toward black people in America. That's the fact. Now, you were mayor of this town.
Right.
All right? I believe that de Blasio, he's only been mayor for a short time, has now lost the whole police department.
He has. And the decade that he's talking about,
Was you?
No, it was actually Mayor Bloomberg. I'm the decade before that.
Uh-huh.
For the last 20 years, between Bloomberg and me, we have saved more black lives than any mayors in the history of the city.
Because the crime rate has dropped. The violent crime rate has dropped.
75% of the people that are murdered in this city, it's almost an invariant statistic. Even when crimes were 2,200 under David Dinkins, 2,200 murders down to 340.
And Mr. Dinkins was black.
Right.
Okay.
75% are black. So
they said that
whose lives were we saving?
They say the activists say the collateral damage of stop and frisk and other aggressive police tactics to bring the crime rate down, incarcerating blacks for dealing drugs on the streets, that's unfair. You can't do that. That's a civil rights violation.
Well, first of all, they were doing nothing about the 1,800, 1,900, 2,000 murders that we had when I took over the city. And if it weren't for the things that I did with Bill Bratton, and Mayor Bloomberg continued quite effectively with Ray Kelly, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 more people would be dead, and 75% of them would have been black.
And that's a fact.
And these people, we were concentrating on the real problem, the 96% of blacks killing other blacks. And what they want to concentrate on is the less than 1% problem. We should concentrate on that. There shouldn't be police misconduct. If this police officer was wrong, he should be.
He is. He'll never be back on the street.
He should be punished.
Yeah, and he has been.
But that's not the rule. And if you're a father and you have a son, and you're trying to keep your son safe, the thing to keep him safe from is black violence.
And that's exactly
not police officers.
But de Blasio said exactly the opposite, that his son, who's half black, all right, can't walk the streets without fear. Now, I want to say one thing. I'm going to bring the mayor back because we have a lot more to talk about.